I'm going to start with a joke. But before I tell the joke, I need to clarify for some of you. There's a philosophy called science of mind. And in a nutshell, just going to nutshell it for you, science of mind believes in affirmative thinking, speaking, action. So when you think something, it's going to manifest in your life. Very much like the movie The Secret. So the prayer is affirmative, the living is affirmative. So what you say, what you think, is what unfolds in your life. You need to know this to understand the joke. So there it is in a nutshell. Okay, a priest, a rabbi, and a science of mind minister find themselves in hell. Quite surprised, each of them. And the rabbi turns to the priest and he said, "How in the world did you get here?" And the priest says, "Well, I'm not a big fan of the rosary. Just don't like it, so I was slacking off, and now I'm here." He goes, "But Rabbi, how did you end up in hell?" And the rabbi says, "Well, you know, I love bacon." And there was just, it's a rule, I broke it, I'm here. And they both turn to the science of mind minister, and they're like, "Whoa, what are you doing here?" And the science of mind minister says, "I'm not here, and it's not hot." Perfect, isn't it? So we're going to talk about hell. I'm so excited. So let's start with some definitions. So from Wikipedia, which of course is the source of all knowledge, it says, in many religions and many traditions, hell is a place of suffering and punishment in the afterlife. Depending on the religion, it can be interpreted as endless or as an intermediary period between destinations and incarnations. Typically, these traditions located hell under the Earth's external surface, actually inside the Earth, with entrances to hell from the land of the living. Okay. So from another website called Jesus is Lord, hold on to your hats. Hell is real, don't be fooled. People don't like to hear about hell, but I'm here to tell you that if Jesus is not your Lord and Savior, you are on your way to hell. Some of you will be upset at this bad news. Well, tell me this. If your house was on fire, would you want me to let you know? Of course you would. You'd probably thank me for telling you. Hell is awful. And if you don't believe in Jesus, you'd better get on the stick, or else that's going to be your eternal destination. End quote. Get on the stick. Now from Rob Bell, who we'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, he wrote, he's a pastor from Grand Rapids, Michigan. He wrote a book called Love Wins. He's been making waves all over the country. And in his book, Love Wins, he explains that one of the possible explanations of hell is there is actually a location southwest of Jerusalem called Gehenna. And it's a garbage dump located on the southwest side. And there's a constant fire. There was a constant fire burning. So it was hot, there were flames, and there were wild animals there that would fight over scraps, and they would make gnashing sounds with their teeth. And just to add some fuel to this fire, there's roughly about only 12 mentions of hell in the Bible. 12. So, Rob Bell. This is his book, Love Wins. He's the founding pastor of Mars Hill Bible Church in Grand Rapids. And he began to question why people have such an adverse reaction to when they hear the word Christian or Christians or Christianity. Why people were immediately going, oh. He was like, why is that? We're good people. What's up with that? So he started investigating it, and he wrote this book. He wrote this book because of something that happened in his church. So in 2007, he decided to do an art show about peacemaking in a broken world. And he invited people to donate art and to contribute art and create art, and he hung them all over the church. And it's a very typical, apparently, of Mars Hill. They're very They prefer discussion rather than dogmatic teachings. They want to get in it. They want to be part of the social change. Really cool church. So they put this artwork up, and one of the pieces of art included a quote from Gandhi on it. So the following morning after the art show and everybody went home, the next morning Rob came into church and he unlocked the door and he came in. And there on the painting with the quote from Gandhi was a Post-it note. And handwritten on that Post-it note, it said, "Reality check, he's in hell." Wow. Yeah, and Rob's response was, well, if Gandhi's in hell, yikes. So he wrote this book and was immediately denounced as a heretic by the entire Christian community. I just did some research recently, and he has a new book out that I want to get. It just came out in March called What We Talk About When We Talk About God. He's still stirring the pot. And there are people that just detest him, and I think he's awesome. And he's not alone. A gentleman named Carlton Pearson from Tulsa, Oklahoma. I don't know if you guys saw this. A few years ago, he was on 60 Minutes. They did a show on Carlton Pearson. He had a congregation of thousands, Christian pastor. And he watched a television about Rwanda, the genocide in Rwanda. And he started thinking about the teachings of his own church. And he said he received an epiphany from God, that there was no hell. That hell was an experience that we were creating on earth by our behavior. He was immediately labeled a heretic. He was removed from his position in his church and ostracized. He actually became a New Thought minister for a while and has since, I'm not sure what he's up to right now, but he was also labeled, interestingly enough, he was labeled a universalist. Yeah, check that out. Now, in theology, universalism is also known as universal reconciliation. And it's the doctrine that all immortal souls, because of the love and mercy of God, or whatever we want to call it, all of us will be ultimately reconciled with this great loving essence. And Carlton Pearson wrote a book called The Gospel of Inclusion, and it's his definition of universalism. In 2004, the Joint College of African American Pentecostal Bishops concluded that his teachings were heresy. I'm kind of surprised that people are even still using the word heresy. So moving on to other people who are shaking the tree, and one of these will surprise you, I think. July 28th, 1999, Pope John Paul II was giving his weekly address to 8,500 people at the Vatican, and he rejected the reality of a physical, literal hell as a place of eternal fire and torment. Rather, the Pope said, I love this, hell is separation, even in this life, from the joyful communion with God, with the essence of love. So according to the Jesus is Savior website, Pope John Paul II is in hell now as well. Joining him in hell will be our current Pope, Pope Francis, who just recently came out with this statement. The Lord has redeemed all of us, not just Catholics, everyone, even the atheists, everyone. And this makes us children of God of the first class. We are created children in the likeness of God, and all are redeemed. And we all have a duty to do good. And this commandment for everyone to do good, I think, is a beautiful path toward peace. If we, each doing our own part, if we do good to others, if we meet there, doing good, and we go slowly, gently, little by little, we will make that culture of encounter. We need that so much. We must meet one another doing good. But I don't believe, Father, I am an atheist. But do good. We will meet one another there. I know. I get good Pope bumps. And then just this morning on Facebook, I love it, there was a quote from Desmond Tutu, who recently stated that he'd rather go to hell than to a homophobic heaven. Like, right on, Desmond. So some traditional viewpoints. How to avoid hell. Well, the first is to be a good Christian. But what does that mean? What does that look like? Is that the same as being a good person? What does that look like? So is it what we say? Now, according to traditionalists, it's all right, you can get it back. According to the traditionalists, there's one prayer that will make you guaranteed to go to heaven, one prayer, and in that prayer you must accept Jesus as your personal Savior, period, and then you're good. Oddly enough, it doesn't matter what you do after that. Just as long as you've said this one prayer, you're golden. And is it who we are? Because back in Cleveland, I was this nice little Jewish woman who was a member of a United Church of Christ, and I had people there telling me that I was a better Christian than many of the Christians they knew. And I didn't really understand what that meant. And I didn't know if that meant I was still going to hell. And is it what we do? If we give away all our possessions and live on the street, is that a guarantee? Like, do we get a pass out? Or is it how we serve? Is it how we live in the world? If I'm a monk and I'm living on a mountaintop and I'm praising God every morning, but I'm not Christian and I don't say the prayer, but I do my job and I water the plants and I care for the earth and I love others, and one day I trip, fall, bang my head and die, am I going to hell because I didn't say the prayer? Is it who we're friends with? I had a dear friend who was gay, and she was talking to one of her good friends who was Christian, and that friend said to her, "I love you. I'm really sorry you're going to hell." And I thought, well, that's a really interesting thing. So does that count? Is it who we're married to? If we marry into it but still don't say the prayer, do we get a pass? Like, are we in on that? Is it how we're raised by our parents to love everyone and to accept everyone? And is it the spiritual path we follow? What if we're Buddhist? What if we're Hindu? What if we're atheist? Apparently, according to Pope Francis, we're golden. But according to other people, that's not true. According to the Westboro Baptist Church, everyone in this country is going to hell until we stop liking gay people. We're as they put it, gay sympathizing nation. And until everyone changes their mind on that, we're all going, except apparently for those in the Westboro Baptist Church. It's very muddy. It's very muddy. And what's interesting is to watch how people respond to their faith, how they carry their faith. Bill Hicks was this magnificent comedian. His parents used to call him the preacher because his comedy was he was like a Southern Baptist minister on stage, but doing comedy. And he was just brilliant. And he told this story, well, some of his humor is a little edgy, and if you've heard of Bill Hicks, you know that that's an understatement. But he does make some jokes about Jesus. And he was in the South performing, and he made some jokes. And after the show, he was in a back alley, and he was smoking a cigarette, and these two gentlemen, came up to him, good old boys, came up to him and said, "Hey, comedian, funny guy, we're Christian. We don't like what you said." And Bill looked at him and went, "Then forgive me." I keep that as a backup. Like when I'm like, okay, remember Bill Hicks. So then I started thinking about what hell means. Hell is when I'm half empty, lacking love. We'll get to the O in a minute. So there are lots of moments when I'm in hell, when I'm separate from others, When I hold resentments and I dwell on them, and I'm in the shower creating scenarios of what I'm going to say to that person the next time I see them. When I'm in judgment, assuming that I know the whole story about all situations, and of course I'm right. This is a biggie for me, when I get into arguments on somebody's Facebook wall. You know, somebody posts something and someone comments on it, and then I comment on it, and then someone else comments on it, and then now I'm checking their wall every 5 minutes to see if anybody argued with me. And I'm right, so I've got to come back at it. And when we get into discussions like the Trayvon Martin trial, and just recently there was an interesting conversation about a certain political figure in New York City who will remain nameless. But I found myself going back and checking people's wall to make sure that my comment was the last. And if anybody commented after me, I had to fix it. In hell. At the moment, I find myself in hell quite often at my current employment. Everybody pray for Heather. Because I know that I create this experience. What's happening around me is what's happening around me. It's neutral. It's all neutral until I decide that it sucks. And then once I decide that it sucks, I'm in hell. And I can't climb out for 8 hours. When I've hurt someone else or demeaned someone else, immediately in hell. There was this one day, you know, Safeway has that new thing. Well, it's not new now, but they started that thing where they say your name as you check out, which I love. I love that. And I was having a bad day. I had thoughts in my head about something else. I wasn't paying attention. Cashier lovingly checked me out, finished the thing, and said, "Thank you, Ms. Hollander." And I grabbed my bag and went, "Yeah." And I got halfway to the door, and I thought, not okay. So I went back, and I looked at her, and I looked at her name tag. It was like Stephanie or something, and I said, "Stephanie, thank you. I'm sorry about that moment. I had my mind somewhere else, and that was not fair. So thank you." And of course she was like, "Yeah, whatever," you know, and she didn't care. But I was in hell in that moment. In October, we're going to be talking about a book called The 10 Challenges, which is an awesome book that reinterprets the 10 Commandments into more modern uses. And the actual Aramaic translation was never the word commandment. It was actually challenge. It was the 10 challenges. And yeah. And one of them he takes on is do not commit murder. And the way he looks at it is when we hurt another, when we say something hurtful to another or do something hurtful to another, we're committing murder to their soul. We're murdering a part of them. And so again, in hell. Oh, and the last was when we were in San Francisco, we went to see Ani DeFranco, who's coming here in February. And we went to see her at the Fillmore, the historic Fillmore, where the Doors played and all these great people. And we get in there, and I'm like, oh, we have to stand? Oh. And now suddenly the experience is horrible. Like, there are tables, but we didn't get there in time to get a table, so we have to stand. And suddenly the concert was like this hellish experience for me. I could not hear the music. I couldn't experience it. All I could feel was I'm uncomfortable. People are bumping me. Those people are talking. These people are in my way. I'm thirsty. Oh, it was like, wow, great concert. Gee. Jill Bolte Taylor, who wrote the book My Stroke of Insight and did a TED Talk about her experience having a stroke. She's amazing. She had this discovery during her stroke. She's a neurobrain scientist, and so she was able to actually chronicle her stroke as it was happening. I'm seeing lots of nods. This makes me happy. She wrote in her book, within 90 seconds of the initial trigger, the chemical component of our anger has completely dissipated from our blood, and our automatic response is over. 90 seconds. Over. If, however, we remain angry after those 90 seconds have passed, then it is because we have chosen to let that circuit continue to run. Talk about personal responsibility. Chemically, we're done at 90 seconds. It's a new challenge for us to count 90 seconds. I can be angry for 90 seconds. And it reminded me of the Buddhist story that I shared in the forgiveness talk about the two Buddhists who get to the river, and one carries the woman across, and an hour later the other one's still mad. Very, very similar thing. You know, when we carry that anger, we're choosing it. So our choices determine whether we create heaven or hell for ourselves. It's what we pay attention to. It's what we choose. So just a couple movie references. I'm not going to get into detail, but of course I had to throw a couple out. The Wizard of Oz, of course, it goes without saying. Okay. One really great one is What Dreams May Come, which is an excellent and very obvious journey into hell. It's magnificently created, it's beautiful, it's heart-wrenching, and it's also a really good teaching experience of choice to go, choice to come back, what we choose. The movie Inception, which is kind of muddy as to where he ends up, and also what kind of hells we create in our head, and if people really could go into our thoughts, what that would be like. And then, since I'm on a Leonardo DiCaprio kick, Shutter Island, which is a great example of the power of the mind. What the mind can create, what the mind can deconstruct, what the mind holds, what it lets go. And at the end of the movie, what choice does he make, and is it a choice? Great movie. And trust me, when I saw the previews for Shutter Island, I was like, ooh, horror movie. I don't want to see that. It's not. It's brilliant, brilliantly made. So a great example of this heaven and hell thing is there's this story. So there's a few versions of this story. But it's an ancient Chinese story about a man who knew he was going to die soon. And so he went to the wise man of the village and he said, I'm going to die soon and I would like you to show me what heaven and hell look like so I know what I'm up against. And he said, all right. So the wise man led him down this path, and they get to this big house, and he walks in, and there's this long table just filled with food, lots of food, and people sitting all around it. And they have these 12-inch long chopsticks. Is it 12-inch or 12 feet? Sorry, 12 feet. 12 feet long chopsticks. And everyone sitting around the table is thin and scrawny and cranky. And he's like, that seems strange. And the wise man says, this is hell. He says, okay, well, then I'd like to see heaven. He says, okay. So they go down the path a little farther and they get to another house, same exact setup, big long table, lots of food, everyone's sitting around it with their 12 feet long chopsticks, and they're all chubby and they're happy and they're laughing. And he says, so what's the difference? In heaven, we feed each other. They were using the 12 feet long chopsticks to feed the person across the table from them. And in another version of this story, the man asks, they go back to the hell to tell them what they saw. And he says to one of the gentlemen, why don't you feed the guy across the table from you? He could feed you. And the man says, why would I want to feed anyone as despicable as that person? So they choose. And so we all find ourselves in these situations of choosing and of misery at different times. There's an excellent book called People of the Lie by M. Scott Peck. He wrote The Road Less Traveled. And I was going to pull from it, but there's so much in it. So I'll just basically tell you, this book studies evil in normal human beings, what evil looks like, and how it manifests in our lives through fears, choices, and confusions. And many of the case studies in this book, pretty much all of them, are people who are experiencing personal hells in really deep and horrifying ways, and with really dangerous consequences, and then also some amazing healings. But it's a great example of, wow, look how this person created, through their thinking, this hellish experience. So, if God gave us free will, then here's the big question. If we're choosing, basically it comes down to why? Why are we doing this? If we believe in this higher power, this larger essence, this loving essence that gave us free will, that imbued in us free will, why would we also believe in a God that would create a place that would punish us for choices that we've been allowed to make? It actually doesn't make any sense. Why would God create a world where only some people get backstage passes to heaven while others don't? Regardless of what we do on the planet, regardless of our good work, our beliefs, the kind words we use, or how we love one another. And why would anyone want to believe in any kind of loving essence, loving energy, loving creative force that would hate us? What do we gain by believing that something hates us? No teacher, no master teacher taught that. Jesus never taught that. Buddha never taught. None of the master teachers taught that God hated us. And then, of course, why is it that some people on the planet choose to use such hate-filled language to speak for God instead of simply trusting this God that we love, that they love, to know that God is doing what it's doing? The earth is on its rotation, the sun is rising, the sun is setting, the seasons are changing, there are tides. I mean, would we even be here if this great creative force hated us? Would any of this be here? So then it comes down to, what do we believe? And I, again, found this on Facebook, and I'm going to read it just so that it's on the recording because I love this. St. Peter and the angel Gabriel had a problem. Peter was sorting people at the pearly gates, letting some in and keeping others out. But Gabriel was finding more people in heaven than Peter was letting in. They were befuddled. Gabriel told Peter to keep working and he'd get to the bottom of this. A few hours later, he came back and told Peter not to worry. He'd figured it out. It's Jesus. He's pulling people over the wall. That's what I like to believe. I like to believe that this is what's true. And so this is the or. Whoops. Half empty, lacking love, or not. Or the alternative. None of us actually know what God thinks. So let's use the resources that we've got. Let's use what we've got around us. We've got these 10 challenges that encourage us to live better and be gentler. We've got our hearts to guide us. We've got our conscience and our conscious knowing. We've got the truth that everyone's doing the best that they can in every moment of their lives. And we have choices. I always say, don't worry about where we're going. Don't worry about if you're going to heaven later. Worry about what you're doing right now, right here. Instead of getting angry and contributing to the negative energy, will you remind me of this at about 10:30 tomorrow morning? I'll just keep listening to this. And instead of, just screaming and railing, pray for those that don't see the divine in you. Pray for those who don't see the divine in you, because they need it. If you're seeing the divine in them, you're good. If they're not seeing the divine in you, they need that love. And then do good works in the world. Someone built this house across the street from Westboro Baptist Church. It's called the Friendship House. They bought the property. It's directly, if you look out from this front door, Westboro Baptist Church is right there, across the street. And they built this house called the Friendship House, and they painted it. And they do lemonade sales on the front lawn, and they feed the homeless. And it's a drop-in spot for people who don't have someplace else to be. And it's a place of love and hope. And it doesn't hurt the people across the street, but boy, does it irritate them.
Just the paint job alone.
Just the paint job alone makes them crazy.
It looks like a proper pride.
It's a perfect pride house. So do good things and actually see and treat others as we would like to be treated. That infamous golden rule. Whenever possible, this is for all of us, mirror, mirror on the wall. Whenever possible, remember that our own hellish moments happen, that we do find ourselves in hell. And so have compassion for others who are experiencing theirs. Because if we're not having one, if I'm not having one, I'm really, really grateful. So I need to have compassion for those who are. And there are people out there who are going to cut us off in traffic and going to be rude to us and aren't going to be awake and are going to be resistant to learn. And they won't want to forgive and they won't want to grow and they won't want to change. We get to love them anyway. We get to be compassionate. We get to be the visible, physical form of heaven to them. And I believe that if we listen to our hearts and truly move from that place, we can make heaven here together every day. Yes? Awesome. So let's do some praying. You ready? You're ready to pray, baby John? Here we go. So just taking this moment to take a deep breath, taking whatever from the talk worked, letting the rest of it go, and connecting to that moment when we felt heavenly in our bodies and in our minds and in this life. Connecting to a moment in our history, in our past, in our life here, where we knew, oh my God, I'm in heaven. Maybe it was in a kayak on the water or up in the mountains hiking. Maybe it was sitting peacefully on the couch with a dog on your lap. Maybe it was laying down with a tiger in Thailand. Maybe it was knowing that life is going to change for the better very soon, and just knowing that promise of heaven was enough to carry you in that moment. Whatever that moment of heavenliness is, feeling that moment of outstretched arms and openness and deep breathing and knowing it's all okay. This is that connection to spirit that we talk about. This is that moment when God, or whatever name we have for it, is living its life through us at its fullest. And the key to prayer is that knowing that in that moment, it's exactly the same as the moment we're in hell. The moment we feel disconnected, separate, closed in, and cut off, God is still expressing itself fully in us. We just compartmentalized it. We just hid it from us. It's there. Spirit is always within us, expressing, wanting to come through, because it's the very essence of our being. And so I pray today, I hold in consciousness today anyone who is blocking that good of God, that heavenly experience of spirit, that deep breath, arms open, standing on the mountaintop, yes moment of love and power, the essence of life itself. And I affirm now the courage and the strength to say yes. To say yes, to move whatever's blocking that experience out of the way and to allow that to come forward. And so whatever may be getting in the way, and if there's nothing, then fantastic. Whatever may be getting in the way for some of us, put it in this stone today and put it in the water and let it go. Let it go. Put it in that salt water and let it live and breathe and be gone from you. be healed and cleansed, and walk out of here today open to the new experience of life, of love, of joy, of heaven right here in our lives right now. So I hold this truth, and I know it is true for me and for each and every person here, and for those in consciousness who are connected to us. I know that there is a release, there is a letting go, there is a space being made for good and for joy. And I give thanks for knowing that. I'm grateful that I can remember it. I'm grateful that we're all here to share in it. And I'm grateful for each and every stone that hits that water, because I know that that means there's more heaven to be had by each of us sharing it with each other. Blessing this time, blessing this prayer, and knowing this truth, I simply let this be. And I know it is so. Ashe, amen. And so it is.